Many ways on the Seychelles, for example, to actually reduce mercury through mercury added products.
Most of the mercury we have in Seychelles is in mercury-containing devices.
We would encourage people to continue eating a diet rich in fish.
First protein intake of our nation comes from fish, so the quality of the fish is very important.
Many years ago, 1950s, 1960s, there was an outbreak of mercury poisoning in Minamata in Japan, in a fish eating community. What happened, and that was discovered after research, was that there were industries, factories, that were using mercury or producing mercury, and that was going as part of their wastewater into the bay where fishermen were catching fish. And those fish became contaminated with mercury. And what was noticed was that people were affected, fishermen, their families, developed strange neurological problems. And that happened in animals as well, in cats, for example. But what was most disturbing was that there were women who were pregnant, who were exposed, who did not have any symptoms, and yet when their babies were born, they were born and developed with very severe neurological problems. So this led people to conclude that the fetal brain, as it is developing in pregnancy, is probably more susceptible, more vulnerable to the level of mercury, so that a level in the mother which was not causing damage to the mother was still enough to cause damage in the fetus. And of course, scientists became concerned about whether the amount of mercury in fish, which occurs naturally in all the oceans of the world, and whether you are close to or far from any source of pollution, whether that amount of mercury in fish would have a problem for developing children if mothers eat a lot of fish during pregnancy.
Mercury is a chemical element which is commonly known as Quicksilver, and mercury can be found in the environment, both natural and by human activities. Inorganic mercury is naturally occurring in the environment, which is found in the earth crust, which when it gets into the aquatic system, it is converted into a microorganism, which the microorganism is converted into a more toxic mercury, that is methyl mercury, which ends up in the food chain. When it ends up into the food chain, it bioaccumulates, and hence we consume the fish.
There's a different factor that can act on the mercury level in fish. First, the diet and the habitat of the fish will strongly affect the level of mercury. For example, the fish with deep praise, I mean deep from in the sea, they can have higher mercury than the one with the surface species. In addition to that, probably the long life of the species will strongly also affect the level of mercury. So for example, the species with a lifespan more than 10 or 20 years may accumulate mercury through time more than the short-lived species.
We in Seychelles do not mine mercury. We don't have mercury mines, so that is not a problem for us. We do not have a small-scale artisanal use of mercury, such as in the gold industry. You know, mercury dissolves gold, but we do have the mercury-containing devices that are imported. Light bulbs, for example. Light bulbs do contain traces of mercury, and we use a lot of light bulbs in the country. And in the past, government has even encouraged energy-saving light bulbs. But now we know that energy-saving light bulbs also contain mercury. So we need to shift now to LEDs, light-emitting diode bulbs, that do not have these substances.
The other source of mercury in medical use is dental amalgam, that is fillings that the dentist will put in the teeth or cavities in the teeth, which has been used for well over 100 years. We know it is mercury. We use mercury thermometers in the hospital, in the health centers. We use blood pressure machines that contain mercury.
They do have mercury in mascara, they have mercury in skin lightening cream. People use that, they are fine for the first 2-3 days, for the first week, for the first 2 months they are fine. And then afterwards it's becoming all sorts of complication, you know, the skin gets worse. And they find it dependent on this and it becomes worse. But in our search in Seychelles, we could not find any of these cosmetics. But that doesn't mean that it's not there, because you can change labels overnight, you can use other labels that are not being tested, you know, for example.
It's interesting as I've looked at the impacts and exposure of mercury around the world in human communities. I find that it's the communities that eat seafood regularly. I think there's a lot of countries that have problems with freshwater fish and the fish that they eat and animals that they eat from freshwater systems. But I think island communities that are dependent on seafood might be some of those places that may be exposed to the greatest threats. And so that's why I think in the Seychelles, the country needs to really look at how they interact with seafood and the mercury that's in that seafood and try to reduce that impact, knowing that that's a very important source of food. It's a very good source of food. It's just a matter of managing the mercury that's in some of the species and some of the age classes.
Mercury found in fish is harmful at a certain level to the health, depending on the amount of fish consumed and the size of the fish that is consumed. But also important, we wanted to point out that we have an element in the swordfish which is called selenium, which kind of neutralizes the negative effect of mercury on the human health.
SFA is very interested in the studies which has been conducted in mercury for several reasons. As we know, the first protein intake of our nation comes from fish, so the quality of the fish is very important for us to ensure the safety of fish consumption for the locals. The nutritional value of the different fish species is very important for the different studies and product developments which are being conducted by SFA for us to know what are the best technologies which are adapted with the different species of fish.
So basically, we were able to measure the level of mercury in different fish species you are used to consume, so cardonienne, macrodou, zob, carang, vieille, thon, and even some billfish. So all of the species were safe for consumption for local population. The main issue was with the marlin and the swordfish, with some high level of mercury. We also look at the good benefit of this species in terms of nutrition, you know, because fish is good for health.
Over the years, what we have discovered is that fish does not only contain mercury, It contains omega-3 fatty acids, which is a very good fatty acid or fish oil, which actually helps to promote children's development. The mercury level in fish in Seychelles does not cause problems, but the omega-3 fatty acids is one of the beneficial components of the Seychellois diet during pregnancy that has benefits for children.
It can bring also good omega-3, good fat, good proteins, good vitamins. So we found, for example, that the swordfish and the marlin, of course, they have high level of mercury, at least higher than others, and especially in the large specimen because they are too old. But they also have a lot of selenium. The selenium, written here, is a good and essential nutrient, really important for health. So in fact, in the body of the fish and in our body, the selenium will bind with the mercury, and together it makes the mercury non-toxic anymore. So it means that as soon as you have at least the same level of mercury and the same level of selenium in your fish, it is safe to consume this fish.
A publication from the World Health Organization and the FAO, who have also been concerned about this issue of potential harm from mercury. And they published a document in 2010 looking at the potential risk of mercury and the benefits of fatty acids in fish. And their conclusion was that member states of WHO and FAO should continue to support a diet rich in fish and should encourage mothers who are pregnant to continue their normal diet, and that there are certain benefits or many benefits from this consumption of fish, and there is some query about the potential harm from mercury, but the benefits outweigh any potential harm.
And for us, we decided to work with the authorities because we knew then that in the Indian Ocean, the levels of mercury are naturally lower, and it's been proven. And also we know that within the Indian Ocean, again, there are many vessels, European vessels, fishing for large pelagics, including swordfish, which are being consumed on the European market, but are not subjected to border controls as we are, since we're not part of Europe. A good example of this is Réunion. Réunion is just next to us, and many times we find the boats from Réunion fishing side by side with our vessels, and they have the market for swordfish, so they keep operating, and we had to stop.
One of the things that I see, that I've seen, having dealt with many of the chemicals conventions, for example, one of the major challenges is capacity. We still do not have a sufficient mass of people who can effectively deal with those issues of importance, especially when it comes to chemicals.
You can go out and do certain control exercise to limit or ban certain products, but if people don't know why you're doing it, it doesn't really make sense. So education is very important for everybody, even the public, line ministries, custom officials, people involved in the import of these things. Private businesses who are importing lights, who are importing mercury-containing devices, dentists, the medical establishment in general, those are using sphygmomanometers. So this sensitization is important.
I think if we think of, do we need to put all this effort and energy toward reducing mercury in our diet and in the environment around us, some of the things could happen that aren't great for us is that it does impact ourselves. It does impact our bodies. It is a neurotoxin. It reduces our IQ. It reduces our memory abilities. It has implications in the environment with fish and wildlife to impact their reproductive health and abilities. And it could have population level impacts on some species of animals. So I think it's one of those stressors that if you don't do anything about it, it adds up with other stressors out there in the world. And if you have too many of those, things start to fall apart. I always think of if we're in a plane and there's different rivets holding that plane together, we could take some of the rivets out and we're still flying in that plane, we're fine. But when is that rivet that you take out where the wing actually falls off the plane? And so having different stressors around us like mercury and other problems out there in the world, I think we're playing with fire a little bit by not taking care of them. So I think it's really important for us to take care of mercury. It's a very tangible stressor and problem that we can deal with and take care of and make sure that we don't have that in our systems and in the environment around us.
It would be a problem if we were a bigger country, if we had a bigger industrial base and we had a bigger need for investment into our chemicals management system. But I think given the size of Seychelles and the level of activities that we do in terms of chemicals, it should not be a major hindrance. It will be an issue, but it's an issue that we can surmount. Well, I think the MIA has and the whole process that led to the MIA has given us a lot of information on options, on areas that we need to pay attention to, and on where we need to reinforce in terms of legislation, procedures, controls, etc., etc. I think the next step, one of the first things that I think should be done is to take the information that we have generated as part of that process and apply them where we can. Apply them through ministries, through research bodies, monitoring entities such as environment, Bureau of Standards, health. And also, I think the next step is for us to come up with certain activities to address the key failings when it comes to mercury.
So the Seychelles can contribute to the global solution by providing examples of how to monitor mercury in fish and people and even birds at a local level that has regional implications. And in the end, the management and monitoring of mercury will be done at a regional level and kind of stitched together globally. Because the problem is a global problem, but it has regional connotations that are complex, that are really customized according to that region. So the Indian Ocean region has mercury problems that are different than, let's say, South America. So I think it's really important to look at mercury management and monitoring in a regional way. And the Seychelles has a leadership role, has shown a leadership role in how to monitor mercury. And I think it can continue in the future to do that as well.
So it is an ongoing story, and the conclusion so far is that this is not a health problem or developmental problem for Seychellois children. But of course, we continue to do the study.
So I would strongly recommend the Seychellois, as I do, to eat fish, whatever the species, as soon as they can and as much as they can. The only issue maybe, or precaution, I would say, prevention will be for the child, the youngest child, because of the brain development, maybe to avoid eating swordfish and marlin, the big one, every day for sure. That is the only recommendation we could do.
From the health point of view, we would encourage people to continue eating a diet rich in fish rather than switching to meat and processed meats that contain a lot of fat, contain a lot of salt, that probably or definitely can be detrimental to the health of children as well as adults. We are confident that mercury does not pose a problem at this point in time.
No, I eat all fish. Yeah, I have. But since I fish for large pelagics, I tend to like the other ones.
We have an economy that is diversifying every day. A lot more imports, a lot more products, and the issues are multiplying. At some point in the past, we were talking only about pollution by a few substances. The conventions are multiplying the number of substances that they are addressing. The industries that are exporting to us are multiplying the products that they are marketing. For example, now we're not just talking about hazardous substances, we are talking about microbeads, we're talking about plastic particles, and we're talking about nano things and all that. So, and there are many other substances that are appearing and that are of importance. There are also competing issues that are shifting our attention away from mercury and chemicals, because they have been there for some time. They are expanding, but there are also other issues that are expanding. So the competition is also a risk for chemicals. So you need to have people who are focused on those particular issues and who are able to maintain that momentum and not allow chemicals to simply die and remain in a corner and not get addressed. Because if you don't make noise, you would find that other issues would take over. So climate, for example, would take over, and biodiversity would take over and all that. So, and then chemicals would just remain as one of the side issues that is not really addressed to the fullest.
Let's go, let's do this shit. Arriver, sont pas pour les survivre. Surtout pour pas la quête là ou comme si on est positif. Bon bla bla bla, passant mes points au tracas. So pour dire tout, bra bra. Ils ont Bef da di sap sa ke kon se konen. Mais ça fa boule en mède pour sou pour sortir son homme. Kou besoin faire, ça kou besoin faire. Qui croyance de Seigneur, qu'on se peut faire pour les étoiles à terre. Il peut écouler mon lait pour n'a pas plus grand joueur. De croire mort sous pas terre pour tousser leur plaie. Franchement ça gagne mi lame. T'as beaucoup pour pétailler, mais c'est moi qui pas pétaille dans son lane. Pareil sans dessous, victorieux, avant bataille. Stratégique ou pas loser pour venir à guerre. Péro de la présidentielle, sorti la cour à craille. Demandant d'un résidentiel, l'exemple qu'on est faille. Pas Eddie Murphy, peut protester, destin mon college child. Quand tu finis, mon spot saute avec mon soda. Vivement la vie avec la mentalité. Ride die, si mon pas rien, pas pour satisfaire. That's right. Personne pas connaît quoi qui peut arriver demain. Nous tournons dans game PC score maximum point. Les nights fait pour hustle, faut des roues machines there. Pas prisonnier destin, mais destin au prisonnier. Personne pas connaît quoi qui peut arriver demain. Nous tournons dans game PC score maximum point. Les nights fait pour hustle, faut des roues machines there. Pas prisonnier destin, mais destin au prisonnier.
Est-ce pas faire des mots nous les corps pour qui raison on est les qui les vous d'abord matin à faire au besoin respirer à cause ça qui nous pas rester là. Fais-nous là, mais qui ou qui tout la foi, là on peut perdre l'espoir. Est-ce que mon compte de mon destin, sans mon aide des voix, parfois mon pas les croire, faut les voir pour tout.